Gilligan. I am from the Electronic Frontier Foundation, which I'm going to use the shorthand EFF for in this talk. So I am the youngest member of the Electronic Frontier Foundation on the legal team. So I don't know if that's a good thing or bad thing for you all. To give you a sense of my age, when I was actually coming into high school, the Facebook app had just come out on iPhones. So that's kind of that's to center us for this conversation here. So with what EFF does, is EFF is a digital civil rights and liberties organization. We defend your civil rights and liberties on the internet. And we do that through a number of different ways. So to begin with, probably the flashiest is we do a lot of litigation to defend primarily your First and Fourth Amendment rights on the internet. We also defend your rights to innovate, when it comes to things more in the intellectual property space. We do and then that's the litigation front. We also do a lot of activism. We have 30,000 members. We have we do lobbying, so we talk to state legislatures, we talk to, as well as federal legislatures, which is of some import for this conversation. And finally, we have a large messaging operation as well. So I'm here to talk today about TikTok, the current TikTok ban. So for those who have been following this for some time,
the proposed.
Yes, the proposed TikTok ban.
Yeah, but it's passed, but it's not.
Yeah. Yes, that is very good. So for those who've been tracking, this is one of a number of proposed TikTok bans. The first, to my knowledge, was a executive order from then President Trump that obviously during the Trump administration. There's been a number of other proposed bans in the different federal legislative chambers. There's also a ban that the state of Montana passed, became law, and then that was challenged in federal court, which we joined a brief with the ACLU arguing that it was unconstitutional, and that ban is currently not has not been not gone into law because it was blocked before going into effect. So regarding the current TikTok ban, this I appreciate, it seems that as we discussed, it's proposed. So the U.S. House passed it last week. It's currently in the Senate. President Biden has indicated he would like to sign this. It's unclear where this is going to go on it's unclear where this is going to go in the Senate front. So I got some notes here to talk about, so I don't talk about law to you all. So the argument for the current TikTok ban that the government has advanced is that what you see on TikTok is dangerous. It's a national security justification. So, to be clear, I think there is a huge national security risk from the mid-dance videos we're seeing on TikTok these days. We need to have quality dance videos that Americans see, so Beyonce has backup dancers. The FBI is very excited about seeing Texas Hold'em live. So the problem with this current TikTok ban, there are a number of, or the problems with this current TikTok ban, there are a number of. The first is that the government generally doesn't have the right to tell you what you get to see and what you don't get to see. It's fundamental to our First Amendment, and there are important reasons for that. It's not only for the First Amendment, but for the kind of democratic values that we have. The premise is that you get to choose what you see and what you don't see. Generally speaking, there are some exceptions to this. So this is especially the case when you're banning an entire platform, like this proposed ban would do with TikTok. I'm using ban a bit broadly speaking because there's some mechanisms involved here. So just to get that out of the way, the one thing that we believe at the EFF is that what the TikTok ban is doing is it's preventing your TikTok bans and other bans of social media platforms like TikTok is when you use social media, you get to determine who you are. It's a huge part of learning and self-realization that you're getting with these apps. we recently did a survey, which you can see on our website, and actually, because you're here, you should all check it out. It's very worth it. That discusses what younger people get out of social media. When they responded to our survey, what we heard from them was that they see all of these things on the internet that help them learn who they are. That's from making new friends. That's from finding new interests. It's even from discovering parts of their identity they didn't know about. So, for example, we had a number of people write in that TikTok's helped them with, their sexual identity, their religion. So it's when we're talking about banning apps like TikTok and banning what you see on them, we're fighting these bans because we don't want the government determining these kind of things for you and stopping you from learning about your identity. So that's the current TikTok ban. I want to talk about some older justifications for previous TikTok bans. I believe including the one in Montana that is being litigated. So the argument is these types of that the government has been making with these previous bans was that China has your data, and that prevents that is a major national security risk to all of us that use TikTok in the United States. Now, the problem with this is that the U.S. does the exact same thing. So we're as you can see from my shirt, we are very against surveillance by the U.S. government. We are actively challenging this law called the Section 702 of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, where the government is fighting a lot of the reforms that they're saying they need for TikTok. So it's a bit interesting. And there's other authorities under which they do this. There are these things called national security letters that they serve to companies like Google, like Facebook, Twitter. There's other authorities that regulate what they do outside the United States in surveillance. So it's not to say that TikTok does not have privacy risks. It's to say that every app we use has privacy risks, including American-owned apps like Google, or like YouTube, Instagram, all of them. When we are very passionate about fighting for users' privacy on the internet, what we believe is that banning a single app is not the way to go about defending privacy. Instead, to defend your privacy, you need comprehensive bans. You need comprehensive data privacy regulation that bans what companies can and can't do with your data. That starts at the front end when it comes to collection, that extends to how long companies can retain your data, and it discusses what they can do with that data, who they can share it with. That's the way that we believe that you need to defend Americans' privacy. And that includes, so in addition to that, those privacy bans, those regulations of users' data, there are important First Amendment implications as well that touch on what companies can do. The First Amendment analysis is different when you're banning a specific app versus when you try to do a comprehensive data privacy regulation like we call for at EFF. So if the US government were serious about trying to do these reforms, the way they would go about it is if the US government were serious about the reforms it's seeking for TikTok, the way they would go about it is by seeking these reforms from all apps. Clearly, when they're doing this single app regulation, it's a show that's designed to prevent others from getting the data that they can collect, and we think that has constitutional problems. So that is a quick tour of TikTok, and I wanted to open it up for questions if people had any. Yeah, go ahead.
Question? I don't know.
Thank you, Brendan, for that wonderful summary. My name is Mahira, and as you were speaking, I was thinking of a question, and forgive me if my question is not relevant, but the analogy that was coming in my mind was that if there is an ice rink, for example, and there's people who are ice skating, so it's flowing and it's working, and if somebody falls, it's very hard to go and save that person who has fallen while the ice rink is in entire movement. So maybe the authorities would try to stop everybody who was skating in the rink and then go and rescue. And then when that damage or that person has been rescued, or damage has been addressed, then put it back on so that everybody starts skating again. So using that analogy, I think that there are some implications of TikTok, and that's what government is trying to do because they saw some damage and they're trying to put a complete ban on and try to go and fix it. So what would be your thinking from that approach? It's a different way of approaching the problem and thinking about it, so I was curious on your view. Thank you.
Yeah. So what we think on what your question is a good one. When the government has an interest, say in this case safety, that's an important part of the First Amendment analysis. However, that's not the only, to be sure, there are definitely privacy interests there are privacy interests when we're talking about protecting Americans on social media apps. The difference is that the First Amendment doesn't allow the government to stop everyone from skating on the rink in order to protect the one person.
Okay.
There are
if it hurts that one person, you can just go in the theater and yell fire, right?
Exactly.
So if it does hurt that one person, then yes, the government can intervene for that one person. If that person's going to get hurt.
Yeah. So when the state has an interest to, in this case, regulate social media.
We are the interest of the state, so we want to save that one person. Right?
For sure, yeah. But when we're protecting that one person, we want to make sure that no one else's rights are being infringed,
Sure.
and that's what there are for sure important interests in protecting privacy on the internet. The difference is that when you're protecting those rights, you can't go beyond what the government's interest is under the First Amendment.
Okay, thanks.
Yes.
There are theories that government or all the three-lettered agencies have some proof that China is potentially monitoring the activity of US citizens through TikTok that maybe the government has access to that the citizens would not know. I mean, what is your view on that?
I can't speak to what information the FBI has or the NSA. What I can say is that we're not aware. The government at least has not communicated. The government has not communicated what these threats are to begin with. When you want to do the type of regulation they're talking about in these cases, you need a very concrete, tangible harm that you need to concretely state your interest in a tangible, concrete way, which we haven't seen yet. Further, when we're talking about the harm that is coming from what users see on the apps, it gets back to banning. It gets back to prohibiting what Americans can see, which is what I was talking about earlier. So those would be how the issues those would be the issues that they would face, even if that is the interest in this. Yes.
So it's not so much that we're watching too many cat videos, and that the government wants to stop us from posting cat videos or whatever. The big issue is and it's also not. We know that we don't have to assume all the governments are monitoring all social media. I'm not, we're not naive, right? So we're assuming it's wouldn't the ban have more to do with how they're manipulating the social media? So earlier in our conversation with the speakers, we talked about how much influence the algorithms have on their views, right? So if a government can steer each and every one of us in where we are pigeonholed to, go to that rabbit hole, they can influence our government, and that's where putting fences in our country from that app, playing devil's advocate here, going over the First Amendment, but maybe there is a need to stop a foreign government from influencing our people for the moment being, and that way that one person in the eyes doesn't get trampled. Is that
So it's a perfectly valid question. The issue that the government faces when it tries to do when its concern is what foreign governments are showing to people on let's say TikTok. I mean, I think you can make the same would also be true on Instagram or another app. It runs into the problem again of the government is trying to regulate what you can and can't see on social media, and that the bar to do that under the First Amendment is very high. So
At the end of the day, that does infringe on the First Amendment, yes.
Mhm.
But it's not because we're watching cat videos, it's because maybe they're trying to influence what we're watching to put us on,
And hence the-
changes our perceptions of what's going on,
And isn't that why they're using the clause for national
And
security?
even like going back to the First Amendment, like looking at the Patriot Act, that infringed on people's privacy and it was in the name of national security. So do you see that kind of?
So there's precedent.
Yeah.
So I work a bunch on, when it comes to national security, when the government's claiming national security does not deprive us of our rights. As I work on a number of national security issues, it doesn't, first there's a very high bar for actually getting to a national security justification. The government can't just say national security and that ends all discussion. But again, even when there are valid national security concerns, it's more important that we actually make sure that our rights are being respected by adhering to the frameworks we have. When we're talking about things like the Patriot Act, that's in the surveillance context, here in TikTok more in the speech context.
So, since you're opposing the current direction where it's heading, if it is signed, what would be the next step? What actions would your organization take to reverse it potentially?
So, I can't speak. We would have to see what the TikTok ban. When we've seen these before, they have every time one of these. In the case of the Trump executive order on TikTok, that was sued. There was a similar one on WeChat that was sued. The Montana ban, that was sued. These were not suits that EFF led, but these were suits that immediately challenged these authorities' constitutionality and legality. Yes.
So, just throwing it out there, would a ban on not people, but bots and fake users and all that, would that solve a lot of these problems maybe? Just having actual people posting and not having all this, because a lot of the times especially now with AI and whatnot, we may be looking at stuff that's not even real, right? So and it's not even posted by a person, so we're not infringing anybody's right if we're stopping a bot or an AI instance from delivering me something. Maybe you're infringing my right to see it, but we're not infringing in that entity's right to post anything, because that's not an entity, that's not an actual person.
So
Unless we go to corporations are people, my friend, kind of thing.
I mean, so to take that first, actually, it's the rights of businesses are very important. Actually, when we get back to the national security context, it's a lot of the reason we have a lot of the defenses that we have against government spying have actually been only because there are companies that are asserting rights on our behalf, their rights to protect our privacy. To start with that, the question of whether the government can ban bots, algorithms that we or more machine speech, so to speak. There are issues with that in the sense of number one, it requires the government determining what's real. So it gets back again to the content issue.
Companies know what they have, if they have or they have not. They can use the same algorithms to determine if it's a real instance of a person or not. So if you put a regulation for, say, you're not banning anything, you're just putting a regulation that says more than certain percentage of your traffic cannot be not real people or something like that.
Again, it would get back to the issue would be that it's a speaker-based discrimination, which there are very high bars declaring that. The bars declaring speaker-based discrimination are actually higher than trying to clear than content discrimination.
But not for things that are not real, right?
Well, for any.
So a bot has the same First Amendment rights as I do?
It again would get back to the point of you're banning what is speaking. So it would circle back to the First Amendment inquiry would still be the same.
So anything has the microphone by itself without you talking into it has First Amendment rights.
I think
No more.
what processes data. I think if you look at bar, I believe that's what you're talking about, right? The Google AI engine. If it has used ton of data. Most of this data has been collected free of cost. I mean, courtesy because Google basically are other apps, right? Maps. It's scary actually how much data gets collected. I know a little bit, but I'm still not like familiar with it. So I don't know. I mean, what I'm really trying to think here is like, if it has collected so much of information, it has processed it, and now it actually has algorithms, and courtesy the data that it is using, there is some First Amendment, let's say First Amendment implications. It will be very tough to evaluate. Right? I don't know. I mean, I'm speaking from an end user right now, correct? So, yeah, that's what I'm thinking. But just coming back, right, stepping back a bit, we have like 170 million odd users, right? TikTok, I believe, as of today. So if you were to do an analysis, like if the ban goes through, what's the implication? And what will be the impact and how it can be basically addressed? I don't know if that's something that is even like that we want to offer, put it on the table.
When we talk about a ban with 170 million users, I don't know how many of those users are in the United States.
No, they're all, so
It's 170 million.
supposed to be like, 170 million TikTok users.
Active in the US,
Active in the
monthly
US.
Active
active.
users,
Monthly.
that's sizable. This is actually a debate by itself, Brendan, actually. Sorry, we have put you in this position.
No.
But this is like a
It's a very interesting topic.
Yeah.
I'm glad we decided to go last.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wanted to solve all technology's problems.
So what, again, I'll give you one quick example, right? So India was able to ban TikTok in 2020, right? Again, but it had a very strong reason. There were like well-established geopolitical tensions between India and China. And there were like roughly 200 million users. And so they kind of did the math and like what will really happen and how much of these users are really, the commerce portion, right? A lot of people have like, these blogs through TikTok and so on and so forth. And so more or less within 1.5 years, everything settled down, right? So India doesn't really miss TikTok. But again, India had like very clear reasons to basically ban TikTok. I don't know if US can actually present that, US government can present those reasons. And the other thing which is really challenging is like TikTok is what, a private company, I think ByteDance, right? I would say. To separate Chinese government from any private entity in the US, it's a challenge for itself. So that is really where things get very blurry, right?
Regarding the Indian ban of TikTok, I'm not familiar enough with the Indian
No,
ban.
I fairly straightforward, but that was like out there in the public and everything was with it, and so it overnight basically India was able to ban TikTok. That didn't happen. That's not going to happen in this country because I don't think the situation is similar to what India faced right back then.
So, earlier I made the point, I forget in response to his question, that when we talk about banning content on the internet, when the government tries to ban content on the internet, it needs to present very concrete, tangible reasons, and we haven't seen that, at least in public. And to the point of what would happen if TikTok were to be banned with its 170 million users, there are what users are getting from social media generally. It is not a totally positive, rosy picture, to be sure. As many speakers have.
People make money, courtesy TikTok. There are a lot of commercial, aspects to it, right?
Right. So when people are prevented from using social media, many of these people are finding it crucial to their ability to realize who they are, that their individual self-realization, especially when you're a young person, and as we've talked about during these conversations, that the internet really presents a gateway to the world. Closing that gateway to the world is closing our ability to realize who we are, just from what we know in our homes to our small communities. Opening that door is what the internet does, and it's why we have a First Amendment in the first place.
Absolutely.
So,
But if you just quantify the impact of that ban and say that, all right, we could move on, and we could basically, I'm not saying that go to Meta, but you find some alternative that will actually appeal. There'll be some implication. Right?
It's very challenging individually and nationally.
Yeah.
It is.
I mean, it sets a precedence, right? I mean, like for companies then to establish US as a market, right?
Right.
Foreign companies,
Yeah.
right? Then it's no different than China, where China can suddenly pull the plug and you.
Oh, they do.
We accept it, right?
Yeah.
But do you think, like-
you cannot run in China?
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
But do you think like banning TikTok alone would cause like, let's say TikTok was banned, people who were at TikTok, would they begin like suing other places, like, or making some claims about Instagram and YouTube that they should be banned now, or would it collapse?
we haven't seen the U.S. government say that anything about Instagram or YouTube or any of those. And I think that really when we see that with the earlier TikTok bans, when we saw the government say that the problem was that that China had access to U.S. users' data of these sites. China has access to the U.S. users' data of these sites when it purchases them from data brokers. So and the U.S. government is currently, or the White House is currently fighting that in this ongoing Section 702 reauthorization. So it's kind of, the government is talking out of both sides of its mouth when it's saying that their concern is access to data when at the same time there's a solution available on the other side. So.
Wait, I have a question. You were talking earlier about how the government should be taking another approach to like solving the issues of privacy that they claim is the issue. Could you elaborate a little bit more on that, please?
Yeah, the way to protect Americans' privacy, which is what the government is claiming is doing with this TikTok ban. We believe that we at EFF believe the way to protect Americans' privacy is to do comprehensive data privacy regulation. What that means is you need to protect Americans' privacy against our online lives are not limited to TikTok. The way to protect Americans' privacy is you regulate the privacy across what they do on the internet. So that means regulating what these companies can collect in the first place, what they can do with that data, how long they can keep that data, who they can share that data with. These are aspects. These regulations exist when it comes to the governments right now, but they don't exist when it comes to private companies. You need to regulate, then this falls into regulating who companies can share data with. There is an entire ecosystem of data that is getting sold in these data broker markets, and then the U.S. government, including the U.S. government, is buying it from them. So you need to close that as well. To effectively protect Americans' privacy requires, and cycling back to data brokers' point, the Chinese government is also buying data on Americans from these data brokers.
It's a free market.
Exactly.
And there's an argument, why shouldn't government, if the foreign governments could have access to the same data, right? I think that was the argument that Wall Street Journal was making.
Backwards.
If you want to protect Americans' privacy, protect it across the board. Don't just say it's TikTok. Exactly.
Do you think GDPR is the framework that US will follow?
I'm not a GDPR expert. I think that we've seen data privacy. We've seen data privacy legislation in, for example, the Government Surveillance Reform Act. We've seen it in the Fourth Amendment Not for Sale Act, which both of which have been introduced in Congress. There's the American Data Privacy Protection Act as well. That would be. But the important thing is these are all comprehensive data privacy regulations that apply to companies across the board, not just they don't single out one.
Is CCPA comprehensive enough?
That's the California Privacy Protection Act for those who are not familiar. The CCPA the CCPA only protects Californians. So when we're talking about, and it doesn't protect Californians in important aspects like the data broker problems I was talking about. You need truly national legislation to effectively protect Americans' privacy in every state.
I think the core issue is because it's a Chinese company, all the data is sitting in the Chinese data centers, not here. And US government doesn't have much control on that data because data is not here. That's why they're saying that if one of the US or some of the US companies buy that, that's why they were proposing long back with Oracle to buy the TikTok or ByteDance US portion. Then data will be here in US and they will have more control on the data part. And that's why they were once saying that Zoom should not be saving US-based users' data in China. Zoom was actually saving their data, all the data I think, in China. So they asked Zoom to move US users' data in US so that they can control the data more because it's here. That's what I think is going on with the TikTok problem.
The government wants to make sure that it can surveil. Yeah.
And they don't have it.
Yeah.
Because it's in China.
It's a surveillance thing for so the U.S. government can make sure that it's surveilling people. So that's the issue that they run into with all these previous discussions. The previous TikTok bans, like the Trump executive order and the Montana legislation. Any other questions?
Good discussion.
Thank you.